At 7:42 p.m. Maya Carter left the small medical office where she worked and stepped into the cool evening air. She sent one final message to Ethan Whitmore before starting her car. "On my way. Love you." It was an ordinary message the kind couples send without thinking. Neither of them knew it would become the last confirmed communication anyone could trace to Maya. By 8:16, Ethan was waiting at home. Maya was supposed to arrive 20 minutes earlier. At first, he assumed traffic had slowed her down. Then he called her. Straight to voicemail. He called again. Nothing. At 8:31, Ethan drove the route she normally took from work. Her car was nowhere along the road. He checked the nearby gas station, the grocery store, even the parking lot of a restaurant where Maya sometimes stopped after difficult shifts. Nothing. At 9:04, he called the police. The dispatcher asked whether Maya had ever disappeared before. "No," Ethan answered. His voice cracked. "She wouldn't do this." When officers arrived, Ethan gave them Maya's photograph and described what she had been wearing. A dark coat, white blouse, jeans, and a silver necklace he had given her on their first anniversary. Then he mentioned the name of the person he believed might know something. His mother. Victoria Whitmore lived 12 minutes away in a large brick house overlooking a quiet cul-de-sac. She had never accepted Maya. Not really. To Victoria, their relationship was a rebellion against the family she had spent decades controlling. Maya was different from everyone Victoria considered acceptable for her son, and she made no effort to hide her contempt. Still, when officers arrived at Victoria's house, they expected panic. Instead, they found composure. Victoria opened the door wearing a pale cardigan, her hair perfectly arranged. She listened silently as the officer explained that Maya was missing. Then she sighed. "I was afraid this might happen," she said. The officer paused. "What do you mean?" Victoria looked toward Ethan. She wasn't right for him. Those words would later become one of the first details investigators remembered. At that moment, however, Ethan barely heard them. He was standing in the hallway, staring at his mother's face, trying to understand how she could sound so certain while his girlfriend was missing. Maya and Ethan had been together for nearly 3 years. They had survived arguments, family pressure, and the quiet exhaustion that came from constantly defending their relationship. They had also begun planning a future, a small apartment, a wedding someday, maybe children. Maya had even saved photographs of houses they could never yet afford. To Ethan, those plans were proof that Maya had every reason to come home. By midnight, officers had found her abandoned car. It was parked 6 miles from her workplace, angled strangely beside an empty service road. The driver's door was unlocked. Her purse was still inside. Her phone was gone. And on the passenger seat, investigators found something that made the case suddenly feel much darker. A single torn piece of Maya's silver necklace. Someone had not simply watched Maya leave. Someone had been waiting for her. And as detectives began reconstructing Maya's final hours, one question quietly moved to the center of the investigation. Who knew exactly when she would be alone that night? The question of who had been waiting for Maya that night could not be answered without looking backward. Long before the abandoned car, Victoria Whitmore had already made her feelings clear. When Ethan first introduced Maya to his mother, Victoria smiled politely. She asked about Maya's work, family, and where she had grown up. But beneath every question was something colder. She listened without warmth, measuring every answer as though Maya were being evaluated for a position she had never applied for. Later that evening, after Maya left, Victoria closed the front door and turned toward her son. "You could do better." Ethan stared at her. "What does that mean?" "It means you are throwing your future away." At first, Ethan believed it was simply a mother struggling to accept her son's choices. He tried to explain that Maya was kind, ambitious, and loyal. He told Victoria that their differences did not matter to him. Victoria disagreed. She never said everything directly. Instead, she wrapped prejudice in concern. She talked about family expectations. She talked about reputation. She warned Ethan that people would judge him. Sometimes she blamed Maya herself, suggesting that she had deliberately separated him from his family. "You don't know what she really wants," Victoria told him one afternoon. Ethan began noticing the pattern. Every conversation somehow returned to Maya. If Maya called, Victoria became distant. If Ethan planned a weekend with her, Victoria suddenly needed him. If he missed a family dinner, she reminded him that Maya was changing him. Then the insults became sharper. Victoria questioned Maya's motives. She mocked her background. She suggested that Ethan was being manipulated. Eventually, Ethan stopped arguing. He simply stopped telling his mother things. That silence frightened Victoria more than any argument could have. For the first time in Ethan's life, she was losing influence over him. Maya noticed the change too. One evening, while sitting across from Ethan at a quiet diner, she asked, "Does your mother hate me?" Ethan hesitated. "I don't think she hates you." Maya looked at him carefully. "Then why does she look at me like I'm something she needs to get rid of?" Ethan had no answer. The relationship continued, but the pressure around it grew. Victoria began sending Ethan messages late at night. "Think carefully before you make a mistake. You still have time to fix this. Some mistakes cannot be undone." Ethan confronted her about the messages. Victoria denied threatening him. "I am warning you because I love you." But the warnings became increasingly specific. One evening, she told him that accidents happened every day. "Life can change in a second," she said quietly. Ethan's face hardened. "Are you threatening Maya?" Victoria looked almost offended. "How could you think that of your own mother?" He walked away. From that point forward, Ethan began creating distance. He stopped visiting without notice. He stopped answering every call. Eventually, he told Victoria that if she could not respect Maya, she would have to accept losing him too. That decision devastated Maya deeply. She loved him, but she also knew what it meant to stand between a son and his mother. And somewhere inside her, a fear was growing. A few days before she disappeared, Maya met privately with someone she trusted. She spoke quietly, repeatedly checking the window. "I don't think Victoria is trying to break us up anymore," Maya said. The person across from her asked what she meant. Maya swallowed. "I think she's trying to make me disappear." She did not know it then, but someone had already begun making arrangements. Maya did not tell Ethan everything that night. After leaving the diner, she drove home with Victoria's words repeating in her mind. She had spent months trying to convince herself that Ethan's mother was simply angry, controlling, and incapable of accepting change. But now there was something different in the fear she felt. It was no longer the fear of being disliked. It was the fear of being watched. The first sign appeared the following morning. Maya received a message from an unfamiliar account. "You should be careful where you go with Ethan." There was no name, no profile photograph, and no explanation. She stared at the screen for several seconds before deleting it. Then another message arrived. "We know more than you think." This time, Maya took a screenshot. She did not respond. Over the next few days, small details began disturbing her. A dark sedan seemed to appear near her workplace. The same vehicle was parked outside the coffee shop where she and Ethan often met. One afternoon, she noticed a stranger sitting inside it, watching the entrance. When she looked again, the car was gone. Maya began paying attention to things she had previously ignored. Her social media accounts showed unusual activity. An anonymous profile had viewed photographs she had never shared publicly. The account followed no one, posted nothing, and had been created only weeks earlier. Then Maya discovered something worse. Several photographs of her and Ethan had been copied and reposted elsewhere. They had been taken from different places. Outside a restaurant, near Ethan's apartment, and once while the couple walked through a park. Maya knew she had never posted that last photograph. Someone had taken it from a distance. She saved everything. Screenshots, messages, photographs, dates and times. Instead of confronting Victoria, Maya created a folder on her laptop and began documenting every incident. She wrote down where she had seen the sedan, when the anonymous account appeared, and exactly what each message said. It made her feel safer, but it also made the relationship harder. When Maya finally showed Ethan the evidence, he stared at the screen and shook his head. My mother wouldn't do this. You don't know that. She is angry, Maya. That's all. She knows where I am. Because she knows where I work. She knows places I never told her about. Ethan rubbed his forehead. You're letting her get inside your head. Maya felt something inside her break. I'm trying to tell you I'm scared. And I'm trying to tell you that you're assuming the worst. Neither of them raised their voices, but the silence afterward was heavier than an argument. For the first time, Maya wondered whether love could survive when one person believed there was danger and the other believed there was only paranoia. That evening, another message arrived. Stay away from Ethan. Maya froze. A second message appeared moments later. You have been warned. Her hands began to shake as she zoomed in on the image. Across the street, reflected faintly in the glass of a parked car, was a second vehicle. Maya could not identify the driver, but she recognized the location immediately. It was the same street where she had noticed the dark sedan before. The coincidence was becoming impossible to explain away. She called Ethan, but he did not answer. She called again. Still nothing that night. This time, she did not delete anything. She forwarded the screenshots to a trusted person and backed up the entire folder. Then she noticed something hidden beneath the message. A photograph. It showed Maya standing outside her apartment. The picture had been taken that afternoon. Maya stared at it, unable to breathe. Whoever had sent it had not been guessing where she was. They had been close enough to watch her. And somewhere beyond her apartment window, Maya realized, the person following her might still be watching. The photograph left Maya with a question she could not answer. Who had been watching her, and why? For several days she changed her routine. She parked in different places, took unfamiliar routes home, and stopped posting anything about where she was going. Ethan noticed the changes, but instead of bringing them closer, they created another distance between them. Neither of them knew that someone else had already entered the story. His name was Calvin Reed. Calvin was 42 and lived alone in a small apartment across town. He had once worked with Victoria at a property management company, years before Ethan met Maya. Their relationship had never been close enough to attract attention. They exchanged occasional messages, spoke at community events, and sometimes helped each other with minor favors. Calvin's life had become increasingly unstable. He had lost his job after a dispute with his employer, accumulated several unpaid debts, and borrowed money from people he could not repay. His landlord had warned him about overdue rent. Collection agencies called constantly. He was desperate, and desperation can make ordinary people vulnerable to extraordinary choices. Victoria knew that. One afternoon, Calvin received a message from her. I need a favor. What kind? Her answer was simple. Something personal. We should talk. They met at a quiet coffee shop several miles from Victoria's house. Security footage later showed them sitting together for nearly 40 minutes, although neither appeared particularly emotional. To anyone watching, it could have been an ordinary conversation between former acquaintances. Calvin left first. Victoria remained behind for another 10 minutes. Neither reported the meeting to Ethan. Over the following weeks, their contact became more frequent. Some calls lasted less than a minute. Others continued for several minutes. There were messages too, although many were later deleted. Calvin became nervous. What exactly do you want me to do? He eventually asked during one conversation. Victoria did not answer immediately. You don't need to worry about the details. That sentence would later become important. At the time, Calvin needed money more than he needed answers. Victoria offered him enough to cover his rent and some of his debts. He accepted, but what she asked in return remained unclear. Calvin began appearing in places connected to Maya. Parking lot near her workplace. A grocery store she visited. A street close to Ethan's apartment. He never approached her. He never spoke to her. He simply watched. Calvin told himself he was only gathering information. He convinced himself that nothing terrible would happen. Then Victoria sent him a photograph of Maya. Calvin stared at it for several seconds. Why are you doing this? He asked. Victoria's response was cold. Because my son needs to understand what she is doing to his life. Calvin did not ask another question. But that night he barely slept. He had made bad decisions before. He had borrowed money, lied about repayment dates, and ignored warnings when his life was collapsing around him. Yet this felt different. This involved another person. A person who had done nothing to him. Meanwhile, Maya noticed the same dark sedan again. She wrote down its license plate. When she searched the number, she found nothing useful. She showed Ethan. He looked at the photograph and frowned. "You're sure?" "Yes." Ethan finally seemed less dismissive. But before he could say anything else, Maya's phone vibrated. Another anonymous message had arrived. "Stop looking for answers." Maya's face went pale. Ethan read it twice. This time, he did not tell her she was imagining things. Across town, Calvin sat alone in his apartment, staring at his phone. A new message from Victoria appeared. "Tomorrow. We finish this." Calvin's fingers tightened around the device. He knew then that whatever he had agreed to was no longer simple surveillance. And for the first time, he wondered whether he had already gone too far to walk away. By the time Calvin wondered whether he had gone too far, Maya and Ethan had already made a decision. They were leaving. Not because they had stopped loving Ethan's family, but because they were exhausted from defending their right to love each other. Ethan found a small apartment in another city, far enough away that Victoria could not simply appear at their door. Maya began quietly sorting her belongings while Ethan saved money and searched for a new job. For the first time in weeks, Maya felt something close to peace. One evening, they sat on the floor of Ethan's apartment surrounded by cardboard boxes. "We could actually start over," Maya said. Ethan smiled. "No more explaining ourselves. No more secrets." He looked at her. "No more fear." Maya leaned against his shoulder, and for several minutes neither spoke. They imagined a different life. A small kitchen, Sunday mornings, ordinary arguments about groceries and bills. Nothing dramatic, nothing dangerous. Then Ethan's phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen. The message contained a photograph of Maya sitting inside the coffee shop where she had met her trusted friend. Beneath it were 6 words. "Ask her what she did that night." Ethan's expression changed. Maya noticed immediately. "What is it?" He handed her the phone. She stared at the photograph. "I can explain." Ethan's voice was quiet. "Then explain." Maya told him about the anonymous messages, the photographs, and the folder she had been keeping. She admitted there was one detail she had not told him. She had secretly contacted someone who might help identify the person following her. "Who?" "I can't tell you yet." Ethan stepped away. "Why not?" "Because I was afraid." "That isn't an answer." Maya's eyes filled with tears. "I was trying to protect us." But Ethan was already thinking about every conversation he had missed, every message she had hidden, every moment when she had said she was fine. The uncertainty Victoria had been waiting for had finally arrived. Ethan returned home, but he did not tell Maya about his conversation with Victoria. He wanted to believe silence could keep peace intact. Maya packed a box and placed an evidence folder beneath her clothes. She had decided that she would not leave without the truth. When Ethan entered, she smiled, unaware that he was carrying a doubt. He hugged her anyway, but his embrace felt different. Somewhere between them, trust had become another thing they were afraid to lose. That night, Ethan went to his mother's house. Victoria listened without interrupting. When he finished, she did not celebrate. She simply reached for his hand. "I know you think I'm your enemy," she said. "You've made me feel like I have to choose. I never wanted that." Ethan looked away. Victoria lowered her voice. "She is frightened, Ethan. Frightened people make desperate choices. You don't know what she has been doing behind your back." He said nothing. Victoria continued carefully. "I am your mother. I have known you your entire life. I know when someone is changing you." The words were gentle, but their effect was calculated. She reminded him of childhood memories, family traditions, and every sacrifice she claimed to have made for him. Then she told him something that sounded like a warning. "If you leave with her tomorrow, I may not be able to protect you." Ethan looked at her. "Protect me from what?" Victoria's expression remained unreadable. From consequences. Meanwhile, Calvin was sitting inside his car, staring at another message. It contained an address, a time, and one instruction. Be there. No questions. He read it twice. Then a second message appeared. Tomorrow night, everything changes. Calvin's stomach tightened. He finally understood that Victoria was no longer asking him to watch Maya. She was asking him to act. He started the engine, but kept his hands on the steering wheel without moving. For several minutes, he considered driving away. Then he looked at the envelope of money on the passenger seat. His debts were waiting. Victoria was waiting. And somewhere across town, Maya was preparing to leave with Ethan. None of them knew that their final night together was already being set in motion. The final night began with an ordinary promise. Maya left work at 7:42 p.m. carrying her bag over one shoulder and checking her phone as she walked toward the parking lot. Ethan had told her they needed to talk before they left town. Despite everything that had happened, she believed they could still fix what had broken between them. His last message remained on her screen. Meet me tonight. Please trust me. She never reached him. Years later, investigators would reconstruct the next 40 minutes from fragments. Security cameras, phone records, witness statements, and Maya's own memories recorded after she survived. At 7:48, a camera outside the office captured Maya entering her car. At 7:51, another camera showed a dark sedan leaving a side street. At 7:56, Maya's car passed through an intersection. Then the trail disappeared. The road ahead was poorly lit, bordered by warehouses and empty lots. It was the kind of place where a person could stop for several minutes without attracting attention. Maya remembered seeing headlights behind her. She thought nothing of it. Then the vehicle moved closer. Her phone rang. Ethan. She answered. I'm driving. What's wrong? There was silence. Then the call ended. Maya frowned and tried calling back. No answer. A minute later, she noticed the dark sedan was no longer behind her. It was ahead. Her stomach tightened. She slowed down. The sedan slowed too. Maya turned onto a quieter road, hoping to lose whoever was following her. Instead, the vehicle turned with her. She reached for it. Before she could call anyone, another car appeared from a side street and stopped ahead. Maya pressed the brakes. For several seconds, everything became strangely quiet. No traffic, no voices, only the ticking sound of her engine. Then someone approached her driver's window. Maya locked the doors. Who are you? The person did not answer. A second figure appeared near the passenger side. Maya looked around desperately. There was nowhere obvious to go. She reached for the gear shift. The passenger door opened. Her memory of the next moments was fragmented. A hand grabbing her arm. Her phone falling beneath the seat. A voice telling her to stop fighting. Then another voice. Just take her. Maya recognized something in that voice. Not the person. The certainty. Whoever was there had planned this. She struggled free long enough to run toward the road, but headlights suddenly flooded the darkness. She stumbled, fell, and heard someone shouting behind her. A passing driver later told police that he saw two people near a woman on the roadside. He slowed down, but when he noticed another vehicle approaching, he became frightened and continued driving. That decision haunted him afterward. At 8:09, Maya's phone sent one incomplete message. Ethan, please. Nothing followed. At Ethan's apartment, the clock moved toward 8:30. He had prepared a bag for their trip and placed the keys on the table. He checked his phone again. No message. He called Maya. No answer. He called again. Still nothing. At 8:41, he stood beside the window, staring into the darkness. He told himself she was angry. He told himself she needed space. He told himself everything would make sense when she arrived. But Maya was no longer driving toward him. She was fighting to survive. Later, investigators found her damaged necklace near the roadside, along with fragments of broken glass and a piece of fabric that did not belong to her. The evidence suggested a struggle. It also suggested something more disturbing. This had not been a random attack. Someone had known Maya's route. Someone had known she would be alone. And someone had chosen that particular night because they knew exactly where she was supposed to be. At 9:04, Ethan finally called the police. While officers began searching the roads around Maya's workplace, Ethan sat alone beneath the harsh light of his living room. His hands were shaking. He kept looking at the door. He was still waiting for Maya to walk through it. Instead, the first police officer arrived with a question Ethan could barely understand. "When did you last see her?" Ethan looked at his phone. "Yesterday." The officer shook his head. "No, tonight." Ethan froze. Then came the realization that changed everything. Maya had never made it to their meeting. And somewhere between the road, the abandoned car, and the missing phone, the person who had been watching her had finally made a move. Investigators still did not know who had ordered it. The first breakthrough came before sunrise. A delivery driver had found Maya beside the roadside, barely conscious, and called emergency services. By the time paramedics arrived, she was struggling to breathe and unable to explain what had happened. She was rushed to the hospital, where doctors treated her injuries and placed her under close observation. For Ethan, the news brought relief and terror at the same time. "She survived," the detective told him. Ethan closed his eyes. Then the detective added, "But she's seriously injured." He looked toward the hospital room, separated from Maya by a closed door. "Who did this to her?" "We don't know yet." Maya remained unconscious for several hours, and doctors warned Ethan that recovery would not be immediate. Every minute beside her made the uncertainty heavier. He kept remembering the arguments they had shared, and each time he remembered dismissing her fears, guilt tightened inside him. Police began treating every detail of Maya's life as potentially important. Nothing could be ignored anymore. The answer would soon become harder to accept. Investigators returned to the roadside after daylight revealed details that darkness had hidden. They found broken glass, tire marks, Maya's damaged phone, and the torn piece of fabric. None of it looked accidental. Detective Daniel Mercer, a patient investigator with years of experience, studied the scene without speaking. "This wasn't random," he finally said. His partner looked at him. "How sure are you?" Mercer pointed toward the road. Someone knew where she would be. At the same time, Victoria was already preparing her story. When officers contacted her that morning, she sounded shocked. She told them she had been home all evening, watching television and speaking with a relative by phone. She even produced a call record. It seemed convincing, but Mercer noticed something unusual. Victoria had volunteered an exact timeline before investigators had told her when the attack occurred. He said nothing. Not yet. Across town, Calvin Reed had disappeared. His apartment was empty. His phone was switched off, and the car investigators had seen near Maya's route was gone. A neighbor remembered seeing Calvin leave late the previous evening carrying a small bag. That was enough to make him a person of interest. Ethan spent hours at the hospital, sitting beside Maya's bed, while machines quietly measured every fragile sign of life. When police finally told him the attack appeared deliberate, Ethan struggled to process it. "Someone tried to kill her?" Mercer nodded. Ethan covered his face with both hands. "I thought I was protecting her." The words came out broken. "I should have believed her." Mercer did not respond immediately. Then he asked, "Did Maya ever mention anyone she was afraid of?" Ethan hesitated. "My mother." The investigation changed direction. Detectives reviewed Ethan's recent phone records, then Maya's, looking for connections. They found repeated contact between Victoria and Calvin shortly before the attack. Calls, messages. Several contacts occurred only hours before Maya disappeared. Victoria was brought in for questioning again. Mercer placed the records on the table. "Do you know Calvin Reed?" Victoria remained calm. "Of course. We used to work together." "How often do you speak?" "Hardly ever." Mercer slid another page across the table. "You spoke 7 times this week." Victoria's expression tightened. "He needed help." "What kind of help?" "I don't remember." Mercer leaned back. "You told us yesterday that you hadn't spoken to him in months." Victoria looked at the records. For the first time, her confidence faltered. I may have forgotten. Mercer noticed the contradiction immediately. He asked one final question. Why did you know exactly when Maya was attacked before we told you? Victoria said nothing. Outside the interrogation room, Ethan was waiting for answers. Inside, Victoria realized that the story she had prepared was beginning to collapse. And somewhere beyond the city, Calvin was running with evidence that could finally reveal who had sent him. Calvin Reed was found 36 hours later in a roadside motel away. He had used cash to pay for the room and left his phone behind, but the attempt to disappear had failed. A clerk remembered him from the previous night, and investigators traced the vehicle through a gas station camera. When detectives entered the room, Calvin was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. You knew we would find you, Detective Mercer said. Calvin shook his head. I didn't know what to do. What happened to Maya? Calvin closed his eyes. I wasn't supposed to hurt her. His first statement was constructed. He claimed Victoria had asked him to frighten Maya. Nothing more. He said he had followed her because Victoria wanted her to leave Ethan alone. According to Calvin, the confrontation had become chaotic, and another person had appeared. Mercer listened without interrupting. Then he placed photographs on the table. You told us you never approached Maya's car. Calvin looked at the images. One showed his vehicle near the roadside. Another showed him entering the same area minutes before the attack. You also said you hadn't spoken to Victoria that night. A phone record appeared beside the photographs. Calvin's shoulders dropped. She told me not to talk. Who? Victoria. Mercer leaned forward. Start again. This time, Calvin's story changed. He admitted Victoria had contacted him weeks earlier. At first, she had talked about Ethan, complaining that Maya was destroying her son's future. She described Maya as dangerous, manipulative, and determined to separate Ethan from his family. She made me believe Maya was the problem, Calvin said. Then Victoria offered him money. Calvin needed it. He accepted. The first task seemed harmless. Watch Maya. Learn where she went. Tell Victoria when she was alone. But eventually, Victoria's instructions became darker. She said Maya had to disappear from Ethan's life permanently. What did you think that meant? Calvin stared at the table. I thought she meant leave town. Mercer did not believe him. You were paid to follow a woman and report when she was alone. What did you think would happen? Calvin's eyes filled with tears. I didn't want anyone dead. He claimed Victoria had insisted that she only wanted Maya frightened enough to leave. But investigators had evidence that contradicted him. Financial records showed multiple payments from Victoria to Calvin. Phone data placed them together before the attack. Most importantly, detectives found a message Victoria had sent Calvin shortly before Maya left work. Tonight, no mistakes. Calvin read the message and looked away. Mercer asked, What did she mean? I don't know. You do. Calvin remained silent. Then Mercer showed him another piece of evidence. A photograph taken near the roadside. Calvin was not alone. A second vehicle was visible behind him. Calvin finally broke. There was supposed to be someone else. Who? I never learned his name. The confession revealed something investigators had suspected from the beginning. Victoria had not hired someone to frighten Maya. She had created layers between herself and the crime, using money, fear, and emotional manipulation to make other people carry out decisions she did not want attached to her. Calvin said she reminded him that Ethan's future depended on stopping Maya. She knew I was desperate, he whispered. She knew I needed the money. Mercer watched him carefully. And she knew you would do almost anything to keep it. Calvin nodded. He finally looked up slowly. But one question remained. If Victoria had only wanted Maya frightened, why had she arranged for another person to be there? Before leaving the room, Mercer received a new report from the forensic team. They had found evidence connecting the second vehicle to Victoria. For the first time, the investigation was no longer built around suspicion. It was beginning to look like a plan, and Calvin's confession had opened the door to the person who had created it. The evidence had finally become too heavy for Victoria to carry. By the time detectives brought her back into the interview room, her carefully controlled expression had begun to disappear. The woman who had once answered every question with calm certainty now sat with her hands folded tightly, staring at the table. Detective Mercer placed the evidence in front of her one piece at a time. Phone records, bank transfers, photographs, messages exchanged with Calvin. "You told us you barely knew him," Mercer said. Victoria remained silent. "You told us you had not spoken to him recently." Still nothing. Mercer placed one final document on the table. A payment made to Calvin 2 days before Maya's disappearance. Victoria finally looked up. "I was trying to protect my son." Mercer studied her. "From what?" "From her." There was no hesitation this time. Victoria described Maya as a threat to Ethan's future. She claimed Maya had isolated him from his family and manipulated him into planning a move. She was taking him away from everyone who loved him. Mercer kept his voice steady. "So you contacted Calvin?" Victoria swallowed. "Yes. And paid him? I gave him money." "For what?" Victoria looked toward the mirror. "To scare her." Mercer leaned forward. "Only to scare her?" Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "I never wanted her dead." But the evidence told a different story. The messages showed increasingly aggressive instructions. The payments became larger. The meetings became more frequent. And the night before the attack, Victoria had sent Calvin a message that investigators believed showed she knew something serious was about to happen. Victoria insisted she had never expected the situation to become violent. "I wanted Maya gone," she whispered. "I wanted my son back." Those words were enough to change everything. Ethan was waiting outside the room. He had heard parts of the interview through the hallway, but when Mercer told him what his mother had admitted, something inside him seemed to collapse. He entered the room slowly. Victoria looked up. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Ethan asked the question she had feared most. "Did you try to have Maya killed?" Victoria shook her head. "No. I wanted to stop her." "You paid someone to follow her." "I was desperate. You watched me lose everything. I was trying to save you." Ethan's voice broke. "Save me from loving someone you hated?" Victoria's expression hardened. "You don't understand what she was doing to you." "No," Ethan said. "You don't understand what you were doing to me." The room became silent. Victoria reached for his hand, but Ethan stepped backward. "You were supposed to protect me. I am your mother. And Maya was supposed to die because she wasn't the person you wanted for me?" Victoria began crying. "I thought I was doing the right thing." Ethan stared at her with disbelief. "You taught me that family means standing by the people you love." He wiped his eyes. "But you only loved me when I made the choices you wanted." Victoria had no answer. For years, she had controlled Ethan through guilt, fear, and the promise of unconditional love. Now he could finally see the condition hidden beneath it: obedience. As Ethan walked out, Victoria called after him. "I'm still your mother." He stopped at the doorway. "I know." He turned toward her one last time. "That is what makes this hurt so much." Then he left. Victoria remained alone beneath the harsh interview room lights. Outside, Ethan stood in the corridor, unable to move. Maya was still fighting to recover. Calvin was cooperating with investigators. And Victoria's confession had finally exposed the motive behind the attack. But one question remained unanswered, one that investigators had not yet been able to solve alone. If Victoria had ordered the plan, who was the second person waiting for Maya that night? The answer would soon emerge in court. The answer to the second attacker came from evidence recovered near the roadside. Investigators identified the vehicle and traced it to a man connected to Calvin. His testimony confirmed what prosecutors had suspected. Victoria had created a chain of people around herself, making sure no single instruction could easily lead back to her. The case became a criminal prosecution. Victoria was charged with conspiracy and attempted murder. Calvin faced charges for his role in the attack and agreed to cooperate with prosecutors. The other man, terrified by the evidence against him, eventually admitted that he had been recruited through Calvin. But the legal case could not measure the damage left behind. Maya survived, but survival did not mean returning to normal. She struggled with sudden noises, dark roads, and unfamiliar cars appearing behind her. Some nights she woke convinced that someone was standing outside her room. She kept the curtains closed and checked the locks repeatedly before sleeping. Her injuries healed slowly. Her fear did not. Ethan visited her often, carrying coffee, books, and small reminders of the life they had planned. Yet guilt followed him into every conversation. "I should have believed you," he said one afternoon. Maya looked at him quietly. "You didn't know. I knew enough." He lowered his eyes. "I kept thinking my mother was just angry." Maya reached for his hand. "That's what she wanted you to think." The trial began months later. Inside the courtroom, Victoria appeared smaller than Ethan remembered. The confidence she once carried had been replaced by silence. She sat beside her attorney while prosecutors presented phone records, financial documents, photographs, and messages. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited for statements, but Maya refused to turn her pain into spectacle. She only wanted people to understand that the warning signs had existed long before the attack. Ethan gave a statement, admitting that love and family loyalty had blinded him to what was happening. Calvin, meanwhile, entered a plea agreement that required him to describe every conversation, payment, and instruction he remembered, leaving prosecutors with pieces needed to establish Victoria's responsibility. Then Maya was called to testify. The courtroom became completely still. She described the night of the attack without graphic details. She spoke about the fear, the confusion, and the moment she realized that the people confronting her had planned everything. Then she looked directly toward Victoria. "I kept asking myself why," Maya said. "Why would someone want me dead?" Victoria lowered her eyes. Maya continued, "I eventually understood that it wasn't because of something I had done. It was because someone believed my existence was a problem." Ethan sat behind her, fighting tears. Maya spoke about the prejudice she had experienced, but she also spoke about manipulation. Victoria had called her dangerous, had tried to isolate Ethan, and had convinced others that destroying their relationship was somehow an act of love. "That wasn't love," Maya said. "Love doesn't require someone else to disappear." The words remained in the courtroom long after she finished speaking. Victoria finally looked at her. For perhaps the first time, she seemed to understand that Maya was not simply the woman she had hated. She was a person who had survived what Victoria had set in motion. The verdict would come later, but the emotional truth had already been spoken. Victoria had wanted control. Instead, she had lost her son, her freedom, and the illusion that hatred could ever be disguised forever as love. And when the judge finally prepared to deliver the sentence, Ethan realized that the hardest part of the story was not over yet. When the verdict came, the courtroom was silent. Victoria Whitmore was found guilty for her role in the conspiracy and the attempted murder of Maya. The judge described her actions as a calculated abuse of trust, fueled by prejudice, obsession, and a desire to control her son's life. She was sentenced to a lengthy prison term. Calvin received a reduced sentence after cooperating with prosecutors, but his cooperation did not erase what he had done. He had accepted money, followed Maya, and helped create the circumstances that nearly ended her life. He would spend years carrying the knowledge that desperation had made him an instrument of someone else's hatred. For Maya, the verdict brought relief, but not closure. Justice could punish the people responsible. It could not erase the nights she had spent afraid, the memories that returned without warning, or the question that sometimes woke her before sunrise. Why did they choose me? Her recovery continued slowly. She moved away from the neighborhood where everything had happened. She changed her routines, rebuilt her confidence, and eventually returned to work. Some scars remained visible. Others existed only in memories she rarely shared. Ethan stayed beside her, but their relationship changed. They no longer spoke about proving themselves to anyone. They stopped measuring their happiness against Victoria's approval. Instead, they built their future one decision at a time. Ethan also had to accept something difficult. Being someone's son did not mean surrendering his freedom to them. He visited Victoria once before she was transferred to prison. She apologized, but the apology could not repair what had been destroyed. "I still love you," Ethan told her. Victoria began crying. "But I can't let you control my life anymore." He walked away knowing that forgiveness, if it ever came, would not require returning to that relationship. Maya and Ethan left the city together. Their future was not perfect. Healing rarely is, but it was theirs. Years later, people would remember the case for its shocking central question. How could a mother become willing to destroy the woman her son loved? The answer was never simply hatred. It was prejudice combined with obsession. It was fear disguised as protection. It was emotional manipulation disguised as love. And it was the dangerous belief that one person's happiness could be controlled by another person's authority. Victoria believed she could decide who belonged in her son's life. Instead, her choices destroyed the family she claimed to protect. Maya survived because someone listened. Ethan changed because he learned that silence can have consequences. And the truth survived because the evidence became stronger than the lies. In the end, justice did not return Maya to the woman she had been before the attack. It gave her something different. The freedom to become someone new. Sometimes discovering the truth is painful, but surviving it can be harder. And sometimes the greatest victory is not seeing the person who hurt you punished. It is realizing they no longer control your future.